In the low wetlands of eastern Thailand, there are villages that do not appear on maps, places where mist clings to the earth and silence lingers longer than it should. In Ban Nong Prai, the dead are not buried right away. For 3 nights, the body remains among the living, watched in silence, bound by an old ritual no one dares question. They say the thread keeps the spirit close, until it remembers how to leave. But sometimes, the knot is tied too tightly. And when the dead cannot depart, something else begins to wait inside the body. This is the story of the corpse binding charm. Chapter 1. The Village by the Swampland. Ban Nong Prai lay hidden between rows of aging palm trees and a stretch of black swampland that seemed to breathe mist even under the noon sun. From a distance, the village looked peaceful, wooden houses raised on stilts, narrow walkways of worn bamboo, and smoke drifting lazily from cooking fires. But the closer one walked toward it, the heavier the air became, thick with the scent of damp earth and something faintly sweet, like rotting flowers left too long in still water. During the day, the village felt abandoned by time. Cicadas screamed from the treetops, and the wind stirred the reeds with a dry whisper that never seemed to stop. No dogs barked, no children played beyond the thresholds of their homes. People spoke in hushed tones, as though loud voices might awaken something slumbering beneath the swamp. At dusk, a pale fog crept in from the water. It slid between the stilts of the houses and curled along the wooden floors, filling the gaps between planks like slow, deliberate fingers. Lamps were lit early, doors were closed before the last light faded. And after nightfall, no one walked alone. Travelers passing through the region often claimed the village felt wrong, not cursed exactly, but waiting in the way an empty shrine waits for prayers, or an open grave waits for rain. The villagers themselves followed customs that outsiders were never invited to question. Chickens were slaughtered at dawn, never at sunset. Mirrors were covered during storms. And when someone died, the body was never buried immediately. It was kept. 3 nights, no more, no less. The dead remained inside the house, watched, tended, and never left alone. No one explained why. Those who asked were met with polite smiles and a silence that settled like ash. Beyond the last row of houses, the swamp stretched into darkness, its still surface reflecting nothing, not the moon, not the stars, not even the thin line of trees along its edge. On windless nights, when the mist lay flat against the water, the villagers swore they could hear faint knocking sounds drifting across the marsh. Slow, hollow, patient, as though something beneath the mud remembered the shape of a coffin and was waiting to be opened. Chapter 2. The Death of Old Chantara. Old Chantara died just before dawn, at that hour when night is at its thinnest and even the insects seem to pause between breaths. Her neighbor, who came to borrow rice, found her lying on the woven mat beside the low wooden bed. The oil lamp had burned out, leaving a thin curl of smoke in the still air. Nothing in the room appeared disturbed. No overturned stool, no signs of struggle. The door remained barred from the inside. She lay on her back, hands resting neatly over her abdomen, as though she had arranged herself for sleep. But her eyes were open. They stared toward the ceiling beams blackened by decades of cooking smoke, fixed and glassy, as if she had witnessed something descending from the darkness above. By mid-morning, the news had traveled across Ban Nong Prai. Villagers arrived quietly, removing their sandals before stepping onto the wooden floor. No one wept loudly, no one cried out her name. Instead, they stood in small clusters, whispering prayers under their breath while keeping a careful distance from the body. The village headman, Samchai, arrived last. He knelt beside the mat, studying the corpse with an expression that revealed neither surprise nor grief, only recognition. He nodded once. "Keep her here," he said. 3 nights. No one questioned him. Molly, Chantara's granddaughter, arrived from the edge of the village near noon. She had been gathering water spinach by the canal when a child came running for her. Sweat and mud streaked her arms, and strands of wet hair clung to her cheeks as she pushed through the gathered villagers. When she saw her grandmother's face, she stopped breathing. Not because of death she understood. It was the expression. Old Chantara's mouth hung slightly open, as if she had tried to speak but found no air. Her eyes remained wide, reflecting light in a way that made them seem wet and aware. Watching, Molly knelt slowly beside the body. Her hands trembled as she reached toward her grandmother's wrist. That was when she saw it. A thin red thread tied tightly around the brittle skin. Not a bracelet, not decoration. A knot she did not recognize. The thread was stained darker near the pulse point, as though it had been dipped in something that had dried long ago. A faint sweetness lingered in the air, not incense, not flowers, but something resinous and ancient. Behind her, someone began lighting sticks of incense. One by one, the villagers stepped back toward the doorway. No one wanted to be the last person standing beside the dead. Outside, the swamp lay silent under the midday sun. Inside, the red thread did not move. Yet Molly could not shake the feeling that it was holding something in place, rather than keeping something out.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. The Unfamiliar Fragrance. By late afternoon, the heat settled heavily over Ban Nong Prai, pressing the air flat against the earth. Inside Chantara's house, the windows were propped open with splintered bamboo sticks. Yet nothing stirred. Even the flies, which should have gathered quickly in the presence of death, seemed reluctant to cross the threshold. Molly sat near the doorway, knees drawn to her chest, watching the still form of her grandmother beneath the thin white cloth. Villagers came and went in silence, placing incense in a clay pot near the head of the mat. Each stick burned with a faint crackle, releasing coils of pale smoke that drifted upward and disappeared into the rafters. But the smell in the room did not belong to incense. It was sweet, thick and resinous, like sap bleeding from a wounded tree. Beneath it lingered a damp, mineral odor, reminiscent of earth turned over after heavy rain. The scent clung to the inside of Molly's nose, coating her throat with a faint bitterness. She noticed the others smelled it too. They paused at the doorway, inhaled cautiously, then lowered their eyes and stepped inside only as far as necessary. No one lingered, no one spoke of it. As evening approached, the fragrance grew stronger. Molly moved closer to the body, drawn by a mixture of grief and unease. The cloth covering Chantara's face had shifted slightly, revealing the pale ridge of her cheekbone. The skin appeared unnaturally firm, untouched by the slackness that usually followed death. She swallowed. No decay, no discoloration, only stillness. The red thread remained tied around the wrist, its knot darkened as though damp. Molly leaned nearer, careful not to touch it this time. The scent was strongest there, rising not from the incense pot, but from the thread itself. Outside, someone began hammering wood, repairing a loose plank before nightfall. The sharp, rhythmic strikes echoed across the yard, then stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so complete that Molly could hear the faint settling creaks of the house. And beneath that, a soft sound. Not movement, not breath. Something like the faint release of air from deep inside a sealed jar. Molly held her own breath, listening. Nothing followed. She told herself it was the heat warping the wood, the shifting of the bamboo floor, the ordinary sounds of an old house adjusting to evening cool. Yet the sweet, unfamiliar fragrance thickened, wrapping around her like invisible cloth. It reminded her of something she had smelled once as a child, deep in the abandoned shrine beyond the forest path, where offerings had long since rotted and prayer ribbons had faded to colorless threads. A place her grandmother had forbidden her to enter. Behind her, the last visitor stepped out, lowering the door curtain. Dusk crept in. The incense burned low, and the scent in the room continued to grow, as if something unseen were slowly awakening to it. Chapter 4. The Red Thread. Night settled over Ban Nong Prai with unnatural speed. The last ribbon of orange light vanished behind the palm trees, and the swamp beyond the village turned into a flat expanse of blackness. Fog began its slow crawl inland, slipping beneath houses and pooling along the bamboo walkways like breath from something sleeping beneath the earth. Inside Chantara's house, the oil lamp flickered beside the body, its flame bending each time a draft found its way through the slatted walls. Shadows stretched and recoiled across the wooden floor, never quite settling into stillness. Molly remained alone with her grandmother. The others had insisted she rest, but leaving the body unattended was forbidden, so she sat beside the mat, listening to the small sounds of night, the ticking of cooling wood, distant frogs pulsing in the marsh, the occasional drip of water falling from somewhere beneath the house. The sweet fragrance still lingered, heavier now, almost syrupy. Her eyes drifted again to the red thread. In the uncertain lamplight, the knot seemed more complex than she remembered, twisted in a pattern that did not resemble any binding used for offerings or blessings. The thread itself looked worn, as though it had been used before. A chill prickled across her skin. She leaned closer. "Grandmother?" she whispered, unsure why she spoke. No answer came, only the faint hiss of the lamp. Her fingers hovered above the wrist. She hesitated, recalling the monk's warnings about disturbing ritual bindings. But the silence in the room felt wrong, stretched too thin, as if it might tear. She touched the thread. The skin beneath it was cold, but not stiff, not fully. The knot shifted slightly under her finger. Molly froze. For a long moment, nothing happened. The lamp crackled softly. A mosquito whined near her ear. Then, the body jerked. It was small, barely more than a tightening beneath the cloth, but it traveled up the arm in a faint ripple, like a tremor passing through water. Molly recoiled, knocking her elbow against the floor. The lamp flame fluttered wildly, throwing the walls into convulsing shadow. "No," she breathed. The cloth over Chantara's face slid a fraction lower. Molly stared. The eyes remained open, and she could have sworn they were no longer fixed on the rafters. They seemed angled, just slightly, toward her. A soft creak sounded from beneath the mat, as if the woven fibers had tightened under sudden weight. The fragrance thickened sharply, filling her lungs with sweetness so dense it made her dizzy. Outside, the fog pressed against the slats of the house. Inside, Molly forced herself to lean forward again, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might wake the dead. She stared at the thread. It was damp now. Not with water, but with a dark, glistening sheen that had not been there before. Behind her, the bamboo floor gave a slow, deliberate creak, the sound of weight shifting where no one stood. Molly did not turn around, because she knew, with a certainty that hollowed her chest, something in the room had just moved.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. The Corpse Binding Charm. By morning, a thin layer of gray light spread over the village, revealing the fog still clinging stubbornly to the ground. Molly had not slept. Every creak of the bamboo floor, every whisper of wind through the palm fronds, had sounded like breath drawn too close behind her ear. Word of the disturbance spread quickly, though she had told no one exactly what she saw. In Ban Nong Prai, silence did not prevent knowledge, it only changed the way it traveled. Before noon, the village monk arrived. Fra Ketizik was small and stooped with age. His saffron robe faded to the color of dry leaves. He carried no ceremonial staff, only a worn satchel tied with fraying cord. When he stepped into the house, the air seemed to tighten, as though even the lingering fragrance hesitated. He knelt beside the body and studied the red thread without touching it. For a long time, he said nothing. Molly knelt opposite him, her hands pressed together to stop their trembling. Finally, the monk spoke. "This knot is not for protection," he murmured. His voice was calm, but it seemed to settle heavily into the room. "It is for restraint." Outside, a crow called once, then fell silent. Molly swallowed. Restraint of what? He looked at her, eyes clouded yet piercing. Of departure. He explained that long before the village existed, the wetlands had been a crossing place, a boundary where spirits lingered, confused by the shifting waters and drifting mists. In times of plague and war, when the dead came faster than rites could be performed, wandering souls were said to return to their homes, bringing sickness and misfortune. So the old ritualists, some said Khmer adepts, others whispered forest hermits, devised bindings to hold the spirit near its body until it understood death and released its earthly ties. A red thread, knotted in precise turns, resin and ash worked into the fibers, words spoken not to summon, but to delay. It keeps the spirit close. The monk said, close enough to remember it has died. Molly's gaze drifted to her grandmother's still face. And if the knot is wrong? She asked. The monk's silence lasted too long. The sweet fragrance thickened in the heat. If the knot binds too tightly, he said at last, the spirit cannot leave. A slow unease spread through Molly's chest. And if it cannot leave? Fra Ketizik closed his eyes briefly, as though listening to something far away. Then what remains inside, he said softly, will not be a person waiting to depart. The bamboo wall gave a faint, dry crack in the heat, but something waiting to be released. At that moment, a faint sound drifted from the mat. Not movement, not breath, a soft tightening, like cloth drawn slowly across skin. Molly's eyes flew to the red thread. The knot glistened darker than before. And for the first time since dawn, the monk did not look at Molly. He was staring at the wrist. Chapter 6. The Second Night. By the time darkness returned to Ban Nong Prai, the air had grown thick and unmoving, as if the village were sealed beneath an invisible lid. Even the swamp lay silent. No frogs called, no insects sang. The stillness pressed against the eardrums until the absence of sound itself became unbearable. Inside the house, the oil lamp burned lower than the night before, its flame shrinking and swelling in uneven pulses. Shadows clung stubbornly to the corners of the room, gathering in layers where the light could not reach. The monk had left before sunset, instructing Molly to keep the lamp lit and not to disturb the binding again. His final words lingered in her thoughts like a lingering echo. Listen carefully tonight. She sat beside the mat, her back rigid, her eyes fixed on the thin cloth draped over her grandmother's form. The fragrance in the room had changed. It was no longer sweet. Something sour threaded through it now, like damp wood sealed too long in darkness. Each breath coated her throat with a faint bitterness that made swallowing difficult. Outside, the fog returned earlier than before. It crept beneath the house and rose through the gaps in the bamboo floor, brushing against Molly's ankles with clammy fingers. She pulled her feet closer to herself. The lamp flickered. The cloth covering the body remained still. Minutes passed, or hours. Time had lost its shape. Then, the fabric lifted. Only slightly. A shallow rise at the center of the chest. It sank again. Molly stopped breathing. Her ears rang in the silence. The cloth rose once more. Lower this time, slower. As if something beneath it were testing the memory of breath. No, she whispered, though the sound barely left her lips. The lamp sputtered sharply, its flame bending sideways before steadying again. In that brief distortion of light, the outline beneath the cloth seemed sharper, the ribcage more defined. The hollow at the throat deeper than it should have been. A soft sound emerged. Not from the mouth. From deeper within. A faint, constricted rasp, like air forced through a narrow reed. Molly's heart hammered so violently she felt it in her teeth. The red thread glistened in the lamplight. The knot appeared tighter. The cloth lifted again. This time it did not fall immediately. It trembled at its peak, quivering as if something beneath struggled against an unseen pressure. The fog thickened around the floor, pooling higher, wrapping the legs of the mat in pale gray coils. Molly wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee into the night, into the open air, anywhere beyond the walls of the house. But leaving the dead unattended was forbidden. And something deeper than fear held her in place, the suffocating certainty that if she turned her back, the sound behind her would change. The cloth sank slowly. Silence returned. The rasping stopped. The lamp burned low, its flame now a dull amber bead. Molly counted her breaths, forcing air into lungs that felt too small. Then, from beneath the mat, wood creaked. A long, slow compression, as though weight shifted gradually across the bamboo slats. The cloth did not move. But the mat itself dipped. Just enough to suggest pressure from within. The fog brushed her toes. And somewhere beyond the walls, across the silent swamp, a hollow knocking echoed once, then faded into the suffocating dark.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The dream of suffocation. Molly did not remember falling asleep. One moment she sat upright beside the mat, counting the slow rise and fall of her own breath. The next, she became aware of a crushing heaviness pressing down on her chest, as though the air itself had thickened into weight. She could not move. Her eyes were open, she was certain of it, yet the room appeared altered. The shadows deeper and the lamplight dimmed to a weak amber glow that barely reached the walls. The fog had risen higher, drifting across the floor in pale currents that seemed to flow against the direction of the wind. She tried to inhale. The air stopped halfway into her lungs. Something cold rested just below her collarbones. A pressure, a presence. Then she saw her. Old Chantara sat at the foot of the mat, not lying beneath the cloth, sitting upright. Her back was bent slightly forward, her hands resting loosely in her lap. Her hair hung in thin gray strands around her face, and her skin had the dry, papery texture of something long removed from warmth. Her eyes were open. They reflected the lamplight without blinking. Molly tried to speak, but her jaw would not open. Her tongue felt thick, sealed to the roof of her mouth. The figure did not move. Yet Molly felt unmistakably that it was aware of her struggle to breathe. The air grew heavier. Her ribs strained against the weight pressing downward. Then the voice came. Not through the ears. Through the inside of her skull. "Do not let them bury me." The words did not sound like language. They arrived whole, heavy with urgency and a depth of sorrow that made Molly's vision blur. Her heart slammed violently against the pressure on her chest. "I am not released." The figure's head tilted slightly, as though listening to a distant call. Fog curled around its feet. Molly forced her lungs to expand, drawing in a thin thread of air that burned her throat. The weight increased instantly, pushing the breath back out. "It binds too tightly." The voice fractured into overlapping whispers, layered and echoing, as though more than one presence spoke through the same thought. Behind the seated figure, the darkness deepened, thickening into a shape that did not belong to shadow alone. Molly's vision tunneled. Her fingers twitched, a tiny movement, but enough to send a ripple of sensation back into her limbs. The figure's head turned sharply toward her hand. The pressure on her chest intensified. Black spots crowded the edges of her sight. Then, the oil lamp flared. Light burst outward, striking the walls in a sudden wash of gold. Molly gasped, air flooding violently into her lungs. She lurched forward, coughing, clutching her chest as sensation returned in burning waves. The mat lay undisturbed. The cloth remained in place. Her grandmother's form was motionless beneath it. The fog had retreated to the floor. Only the dying flame of the lamp flickered weakly, as if exhausted by its own brief brightness. Molly pressed her shaking hands against her ribs, gulping air that now seemed painfully thin. She told herself it had been a dream. A waking nightmare born from grief, exhaustion, and fear. Yet as her breathing slowed, she became aware of a lingering cold imprint just below her collarbones, the exact shape of pressure where something unseen had rested. From outside, beyond the silent swamp, came a faint hollow knock. One. Then nothing. Molly did not dare close her eyes again. Because deep within her chest, beneath the fading panic, a new fear had taken root. The certainty that the voice had not been asking for help, but warning her what would happen if she failed. Chapter 8. The Wet Footprints. Dawn came without birdsong. A dull gray light seeped into the house, revealing a stillness that felt heavier than night. Molly remained seated where she had collapsed after the suffocating dream, her back pressed against the wall, her eyes raw from refusing sleep. The oil lamp had burned dry, leaving a thin curl of blackened wick and a faint smell of char. For several long moments she did not look toward the mat. She listened first. No breathing. No shifting cloth. No whisper from within the house. Only the distant lap of water moving slowly through the reeds beyond the village. At last, she forced herself to stand. The bamboo floor felt cold beneath her bare feet, damp in places where fog had settled during the night. She steadied herself against the wall and turned toward her grandmother's body. The cloth lay exactly as it had before. Still, Flat. Untouched. Molly released a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Then she saw the floor. A dark mark glistened near the edge of the mat. At first she thought it was spilled water from the incense bowl. But as her eyes adjusted to the weak morning light, the shape resolved into something unmistakable. A footprint. Small, bare, wet. The print faced away from the mat. Another lay beyond it. Then another. They continued across the bamboo slats, each one darker at the center where moisture had pooled in the grain of the wood. The trail moved slowly toward the rear of the house, where the slatted door hung slightly ajar. Molly's mouth went dry. She crouched beside the first print, careful not to touch it. The moisture shimmered faintly, as though mixed with oil. It did not smell like swamp water, nor did it carry the mineral tang of the well. Instead, a faint sweetness clung to it, the same resinous fragrance that had thickened the air through the night. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She looked back at the mat. The cloth had not shifted. The red thread remained tied at the wrist. The body had not moved. Yet the prints were fresh, their edges still beading with moisture. They led toward the rear door. Beyond it lay the narrow walkway descending to the damp earth beneath the house, where fog still lingered in pale sheets. Molly stood slowly. Each step toward the door felt heavier, as though the air itself resisted her movement. The silence pressed in around her, amplifying the faint creak of bamboo beneath her weight. She stopped at the threshold. The last footprint rested at the edge of the doorway, toes angled downward toward the steps below. Beyond that point, the trail vanished. The ground beneath the house lay undisturbed, smooth mud, unbroken by any mark. Molly's skin prickled with cold. Behind her, the house remained silent. Before her, the fog drifted low and patient, concealing the earth. A faint ripple disturbed the surface of pooled water near the stilts. Though no wind stirred, she became aware of a subtle sensation at the base of her spine, the unmistakable feeling of being watched from very close behind. Slowly, carefully, she turned her head. The interior of the house lay in gray stillness. The mat, the cloth, the unmoving form beneath. Nothing had changed. Yet the sweet, unfamiliar fragrance thickened again, spreading through the morning air like something newly opened. Molly stepped back inside and closed the rear door. The bamboo latch slid into place with a hollow click that echoed louder than it should have. She did not look at the footprints again. But as the gray light strengthened, she noticed they were not drying. They remained dark, as if whatever had made them had only just passed through, and might still be near.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. The Shrine Beyond the Trees. By late morning, the footprints had faded from sight, though the damp darkness they left behind seemed to linger in Molly's thoughts like a stain that refused to wash away. The villagers came and went with lowered eyes, placing food near the doorway and whispering prayers they did not finish. No one mentioned the prints. No one asked how the night had passed. Silence, Molly realized, was another ritual. When the sun reached its highest point, she tied her hair back, covered her shoulders with a thin cloth, and stepped onto the narrow path leading away from Ban Nong Prai. No one stopped her, but she felt their awareness follow her, a quiet, collective knowing that she was walking towards something the village preferred not to name. The path curved through tall reeds and twisted palms, the ground soft beneath her feet. Cicadas screamed in the heat, their relentless drone filling the spaces between her thoughts. The air smelled of wet soil and decaying leaves, but beneath it lingered that same faint sweetness she had come to dread. After half an hour, the trees grew closer together, their branches weaving a canopy that dimmed the light. The path narrowed, half swallowed by roots and creeping vines. Here, the air felt older, undisturbed, as though it had not been breathed in generations. The shrine appeared without warning. Stone steps, cracked and tilted, rose from the earth like broken teeth. At their top stood a small structure of darkened brick, its roof partially collapsed, prayer ribbons long since bleached into colorless threads that fluttered weakly in the stagnant air. Molly stopped at the foot of the steps. Her grandmother had forbidden her to come here. Offerings once left by villagers lay fused into the ground, melted wax. Fragments of incense bowls, and hardened lumps of something resinous that glistened faintly in the filtered light. The sweetness in the air intensified. She climbed slowly. Inside, the shrine was cooler, the air dense and unmoving. A cracked stone altar stood against the far wall, its surface stained by years of oil and ash. Behind it, faint symbols had been carved into the brick, spirals, intersecting lines, and shapes that resembled knotted loops. Binding patterns. Molly's fingers hovered near one of the carvings. The lines matched the twists of the red thread. A chill spread through her arms. At the base of the altar lay a shallow clay bowl filled with hardened black residue. Embedded within it were strands of thread, darkened and fused together by resin and soot. Some were red, others had faded to brown. She knelt, drawn by a quiet pull she could not explain. The air thickened. Somewhere beyond the shrine walls, a branch cracked sharply, echoing through the trees. Molly froze, listening. The forest fell silent. Even the cicadas stopped. A faint pressure built in her ears, like the heavy stillness before a storm. Then, from the shadowed interior behind the altar, a soft sound emerged. Not footsteps, not breath, but the faint, dry tightening of fibers pulled slowly under strain. Molly's chest tightened. She became aware that the sweetness in the air no longer resembled resin or sap. It smelled closer now, warmer, like something newly uncovered from damp earth. She rose slowly and back toward the entrance, unwilling to turn her back on the dark recess behind the altar. As she reached the steps, a weak gust of wind stirred the faded ribbons above the doorway. They rustled together with a sound like dry whispers. Molly descended without looking back. Only when she reached the tree line did the forest sounds return, first a single insect call, then another, until the air filled once more with the harsh drone of cicadas. She did not stop walking until the roofs of Ban Nong Prai came into view. Yet even in the open light, with the village before her and the swamp beyond, she could not shake the certainty that she had not left the shrine alone. And that whatever lingered there recognized the pattern of the knot now binding her grandmother's wrist. Chapter 10. The Truth the Village Buried. When Molly returned to Ban Nong Prai, the afternoon light had taken on a dull, metallic hue, as though the sun itself struggled to penetrate the weight hanging over the village. Smoke drifted from cooking fires, but no voices rose with it. Even the children, usually restless by day's end, remained inside. She found the village headman, Somchai, seated beneath the raised platform of the meeting house. He sat motionless on a low stool, hands resting on his knees, staring toward the swamp as if measuring the distance to something only he could see. He did not look surprised when she approached. "You went to the shrine," he said quietly. It was not a question. Molly lowered her eyes. "I needed to understand." Somchai exhaled slowly through his nose. The sound carried the weight of long years and unfinished grief. "No one understands," he said. "We only repeat what was done before us." He motioned for her to sit. The air beneath the platform felt cooler, but the faint sweetness still lingered, threading through the smell of damp bamboo and old smoke. "Long ago," he began, "before this village had a name, people settled near the marsh because the soil was rich and the water never ran dry. But they soon learned the ground did not keep what was buried in it." Molly felt a tightening in her chest. Bodies rose, he continued, his voice flat with memory rather than drama. Not walking, not alive, but disturbed. Animals would not go near the graves. Children woke screaming of faces pressed beneath the floorboards. Illness spread. Crops rotted in patches shaped like open hands. The villagers sought monks, healers, wandering ritualists. Some fled, others died. At last, Somchai said, forest adepts came. Men who spoke a language none here understood. They said the marsh was a threshold. Spirits lingered, confused by the shifting waters and drifting fog. The dead did not know where to go. Molly thought of the shrine carvings, the looping patterns, the hardened resin, the fused threads. They taught the binding, she whispered. Somchai nodded. The body is kept, the thread is tied, The spirit is held close until it loosens its ties to breath, to memory, to the sound of its own name. He paused, his gaze drifting toward the distant line of palms. For generations, it worked. The silence between them thickened. Molly swallowed, and when it doesn't, Sanchai's jaw tightened. In recent years, the bindings fail. Knots are tied as they were taught. Yet the dead do not settle. Animals refuse the houses. People dream of suffocation. We hear knocking beneath the floors when the fog is thick. A chill moved across Molly's skin. The thread restrains, she said, recalling the monk's words, but something else remains. Sanchai finally turned to look at her. Something learns, he replied. The breeze shifted beneath the platform, carrying with it the now familiar resinous sweetness. Molly's stomach tightened. Why not stop the ritual? She asked. Sanchai's gaze hardened with quiet urgency. Because when we tried, he said, the one we buried early was found 3 nights later at his own doorway. Molly felt the air leave her lungs. The grave was unopened, he continued, but the earth above it was wet and marked with prints. A hollow ringing filled her ears. Behind them, somewhere deep within the village, a wooden plank creaked sharply, a dry, splitting sound that echoed through the stillness. Neither of them moved. The binding holds the spirit, Sanchai said softly. But if the spirit cannot leave, something else takes its place. The sweetness in the air thickened, clinging to Molly's throat. From the direction of her grandmother's house, a faint sound drifted through the afternoon stillness. A slow, deliberate tightening of woven fibers under strain. Molly rose before she realized she had stood. Sanchai did not try to stop her, because they both knew the third night was approaching, and whatever waited within the binding would not remain patient much longer.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. Scratching Beneath the Wood. By the time dusk fell, the sky above Ban Nong Prai had turned the color of tarnished tin. A low bank of clouds pressed down over the palms, sealing the village beneath a dim, suffocating light that seemed reluctant to fade into night. Villagers moved quickly, finishing chores before darkness settled. Doors were barred earlier than usual. Lamps were lit behind shuttered windows. No cooking fires burned outside. Everyone knew the third night had come. Inside Chantara's house, the air felt unnaturally close, as though the walls had drawn inward. The sweetness that had lingered for 2 days now carried a sour undertone, thick enough to taste. Molly knelt beside the mat, her body rigid with anticipation. The monk had returned and now sat near the doorway, murmuring low chants that blended with the faint hiss of the oil lamp. His voice rose and fell like breath drawn from deep underground. The red thread at Chantara's wrist looked darker than ever, its fibers swollen, the knot glossy with a damp sheen. Outside, the fog thickened rapidly, pressing against the slats of the house. The lamp flame bent sideways. Then the sound came. A faint scrape. Molly lifted her head. Silence followed. She held her breath. Another scrape. This time it came from beneath the mat, a dry, dragging sound like brittle twigs pulled slowly across wood. Her throat tightened. The monk did not stop chanting. The sound came again. Scrrrr, longer now. Deliberate. Molly's eyes fixed on the woven mat. The fibers trembled almost imperceptibly, as though something beneath them tested their tension. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared she might miss the next sound. It came from the center of the mat. A slow, dragging line. Then another, crossing the first. The unmistakable rhythm of fingernails drawn across wood. Molly's stomach lurched. The monk's chanting deepened, the cadence shifting into older syllables that seemed to thicken the air itself. Scrrrr. The mat dipped slightly at the center. A faint bulge pressed upward from beneath, then receded. Molly's breath shuddered. The cloth covering the body remained smooth, unmoving. But beneath it, the bamboo slats creaked under shifting pressure. The scratching resumed. Faster now. More insistent. Not random. Not restless. Purposeful. As though something trapped within were testing the boundaries of its confinement, searching for a seam. The sweetness in the air intensified sharply, carrying with it the damp odor of freshly turned earth. The monk's voice rose, filling the small house with vibrating resonance. Outside, the swamp lay silent. Inside, the scratching stopped. The sudden stillness rang in Molly's ears. She realized she had leaned forward without meaning to. Her hands pressed into the floor, her face inches from the mat. The red thread glistened. A bead of dark moisture gathered at the knot. Then, a single, sharp knock sounded from beneath the wood. Molly jerked back with a strangled gasp. The monk's chanting faltered for the briefest instant before resuming, louder than before. Nothing moved. No further sound followed. Yet the silence felt changed, stretched tight like skin pulled over a drum. Molly's lungs burned as she forced herself to breathe. From beyond the walls, across the black surface of the swamp, an answering hollow knock echoed faintly through the night. One from within, one from beyond, and between them, the fragile barrier of wood and thread held, for now. Chapter 12. The Spirit That Could Not Depart. The knocking did not return, but its echo lingered in Molly's bones long after the sound faded. The monk's chanting continued without pause, low and rhythmic, as if each syllable were placed carefully between the fragile spaces holding the night together. The oil lamp burned weakly now, its flame thin and wavering, painting the walls in dull amber strokes. Fog pressed against the slats from outside, dimming the last traces of moonlight until the house felt suspended in a gray, airless void. Molly's gaze remained fixed on the red thread. The knot pulsed faintly in the lamplight. Not movement. Not quite. But the sheen upon it thickened and thinned, as if responding to a rhythm too slow for the human body. The monk's voice dropped into a deeper register. "The binding is wrong," he said without lifting his eyes. The words seemed to fall heavily onto the floor between them. Molly swallowed. "Can it be retied?" "No." The monk's chanting resumed for several breaths before he continued. "It has tightened through the night. The spirit is restrained, but not guided. It does not understand its death." A chill spread through Molly's chest. "And if it does not understand?" she asked. The monk's hands tightened around his prayer beads. "It struggles." As if in answer, the mat gave a faint, dry creak. Both of them froze. Silence followed. The monk reached slowly toward the wrist but stopped short of touching the thread. The air above it shimmered faintly, distorting the lamplight as heat might rise from sun-baked stone. "The knot binds too close," he whispered. "It holds the spirit against the flesh." Molly felt nausea rise in her throat. "The body remembers breath," he continued. "The spirit remembers being alive, but they no longer belong together." The sweetness in the air thickened sharply, carrying the damp odor of soil newly opened. A faint tremor traveled through the mat. Then stillness. Molly's fingers curled against the floor. "What happens if it remains?" she asked. The monk closed his eyes briefly. "When departure is denied," he said, "something else answers the vacancy." The oil lamp flickered violently, its flame stretching thin before snapping upright again. From beneath the cloth, the faintest sound emerged. Not breath, not voice, but a constricted vibration deep within the chest cavity, like air trapped in a sealed vessel searching for release. Molly's vision blurred. The monk's chanting rose sharply, the syllables striking the walls in rapid succession. The red thread darkened further, its fibers swelling as if saturated. A bead of thick liquid formed at the knot and slid slowly down the wrist, leaving a dark trail along the brittle skin. The tremor beneath the mat returned. Stronger. The bamboo slats groaned faintly under shifting weight. Molly's heart slammed against her ribs. The vibration stopped. Silence crashed back into the room. The monk's chant softened but did not cease. After several long breaths, he spoke again, his voice barely audible. "If the binding is not released before dawn, the spirit will no longer be the one seeking escape." Molly's stomach tightened with cold dread. "Then what will remain?" she whispered. The monk did not answer immediately. Outside, far across the swamp, a hollow knock echoed through the fog. He opened his eyes. "What remains?" he said, will not remember being human. The sweetness in the air turned cloying, oppressive. The lamp flame shrank lower. And somewhere within the bound stillness beneath the cloth, something shifted, not in struggle, but in slow, deliberate patience. Waiting for the moment restraint would fail.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. The Releasing Rite. The hour before dawn approached, the narrow seam between night and morning when the world seemed to hesitate between breaths. Outside, the fog lay thick over the swamp, swallowing the palms and walkways until the village appeared suspended in a white, depthless void. Inside the house, the air had grown heavy and damp, as though each inhalation passed through wet cloth. The sweetness that once lingered in the room had soured into something cloying and earthen, like soil freshly opened after long burial. Fra Ketizik stopped chanting. The silence that followed rang louder than any sound. "It must be released now," he said. Molly's pulse roared in her ears. "Will it leave?" The monk did not answer. Instead, he reached into his satchel and withdrew a small clay bowl filled with gray ash, a short length of white thread, and a thin knife whose blade had been blackened by soot and oil. He motioned for Molly to move back. She obeyed, retreating until her shoulders touched the bamboo wall. The fog creeping through the floor slats brushed against her ankles like cold breath. The monk sprinkled ash around the mat in a careful circle, murmuring syllables too old for Molly to recognize. Each pinch of ash struck the floor with a soft hiss, as though falling onto heated stone. The red thread glistened wetly at the wrist. The cloth over the body remained still, but the bamboo beneath gave a faint, steady strain, the sound of fibers stretched too tight. The monk lifted the knife. "Do not speak," he whispered. "Do not answer if it calls." A tremor ran through Molly's arms. He reached for the knot. The air above the wrist warped, bending the lamplight into wavering distortions. The fragrance in the room thickened sharply, filling Molly's mouth with a bitter sweetness that made her swallow hard. The blade touched the thread. Instantly, the mat shuddered. A low vibration rose from within the chest cavity beneath the cloth, deep and resonant, like the hum of a hollow vessel struck from far away. The monk began chanting again, louder now. The knife sawed gently through the resin-hardened fibers. The thread tightened. The knot darkened, swelling with moisture that seeped over the skin like slow ink. Molly pressed her back against the wall, her lungs refusing full breath. The vibration deepened. The cloth at the chest quivered. A faint rasp forced its way upward from the unmoving mouth beneath. The thread snapped. At once, the lamp flame flared violently, throwing wild shadows across the walls. The body convulsed. Not a violent thrashing, but a single, unnatural arch, lifting the chest sharply before collapsing back onto the mat with a hollow thud. The cloth slid from the face. Chantara's eyes opened. They reflected no recognition, only depth. Her mouth fell open wider than the jaw should allow, and from within emerged a thin stream of dark vapor, twisting upward like smoke drawn through water. The monk's chanting rose into a fierce cadence, the syllables striking the air like blows. The vapor thickened, coiling above the body, folding in upon itself as if gathering shape. Molly felt pressure build inside her ears. The room seemed to tilt, the fog rising higher around the mat, drawn toward the twisting darkness. Whispers layered within the air, not voices, but fragments of breath, fragments of pleading, fragments of unfinished words. The monk flung the white thread into the rising vapor and pressed his palm against the corpse's brow. The dark coil shuddered. A sound burst from it, not a scream, not a cry, but a tearing vibration that seemed to split the silence itself. Then, with a violent inward collapse, the vapor imploded, vanishing into nothing. The pressure vanished. The fog dropped flat to the floor. The lamp flame shrank to a weak, trembling bead. Chantara's mouth closed. Her eyes dulled. Her body sank into stillness, heavier now, emptied of tension, like a vessel finally drained. The monk remained motionless, his palm still resting on her brow. Molly realized she had been holding her breath and drew air into her lungs with a shudder. Outside, The first faint birds began to call. The fog loosened its grip on the house. But beneath the fragile return of morning sounds, Molly sensed something had not ended. Only shifted. Because the air no longer felt crowded. It felt hollow. And from somewhere beyond the swamp, far and indistinct, a single hollow knock echoed once. As if something, denied its refuge, had begun searching for another. Chapter 14. What left the body? Morning arrived slowly, as though reluctant to cross the threshold of Ban Nong Prai. The fog loosened but did not fully retreat, thinning into pale veils that drifted between the houses and clung to the stilts above the damp earth. Light filtered through in a dull, colorless wash, revealing a village that seemed to have aged overnight. Inside Chantara's house, the air felt hollow. The oppressive sweetness had vanished. In its place lingered only the faint odor of ash and cooled oil. The silence no longer pressed inward, instead, it stretched outward, leaving an emptiness that made every small sound feel exposed. Chantara's body lay motionless beneath the cloth. The stiffness that had resisted decay was gone. Her skin had taken on the softened stillness of true death, and her mouth rested naturally closed. The tension that had drawn her features tight over the past 3 nights had drained away, leaving a face Molly recognized again, tired, lined, and at peace. Fra Ketizik sat beside the mat, eyes closed, prayer beads resting loosely in his palm. The deep lines of exhaustion around his mouth suggested the ritual had taken more from him than his still posture revealed. "Has she gone?" Molly whispered. The monk opened his eyes slowly. He did not answer at once. "The binding released her," he said finally, "but release and departure are not the same." A faint chill moved along Molly's arms. Outside, villagers gathered quietly, waiting for permission to prepare the burial. No one stepped inside. No one wished to be the first to cross the threshold after the night's work. Molly noticed the ash circle had been disturbed, not broken, but smudged, as though a soft current had passed across it from within. She followed the faint streaking marks until they vanished near the doorway. "The vapor," she began, her voice tightening. "Did it leave?" The monk's gaze drifted toward the open slats of the wall, beyond which the swamp lay in muted gray stillness. "It was drawn away," he said, "but not destroyed." The word settled heavily in the room. From outside came the soft rustle of movement as villagers shifted their weight on the bamboo walkway. A crow called once, its voice brittle in the damp air. Molly rose slowly and stepped toward the doorway. The fog lay low beneath the house, thin enough now to reveal the mud below. Nothing disturbed its smooth surface. Yet the air beyond the threshold felt subtly altered, as though something unseen had passed through recently, displacing the stillness without leaving shape behind. She became aware of a faint pressure deep in her ears, like the lingering echo after a distant drum. Behind her, the monk spoke again. "When a spirit is held too long," he said, "its path weakens. It may lose its way." Molly's fingers tightened around the doorframe. "And if it loses its way?" The monk did not look at her. "It may follow the nearest breath," he replied. A cold ripple passed through her chest. At that moment, a breeze moved across the swamp, the first true wind in days. It brushed through the palms and slid beneath the house, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and distant rain. For an instant, Molly thought she heard whispering layered within it. Then the sound vanished. Villagers began preparing the burial platform. Their movements were careful, deliberate, as though guided by gestures learned through generations of quiet repetition. Behind Molly, the house remained still. Before her, the fog thinned further, revealing dark water pooled between reeds. The world seemed to be returning to itself. Yet beneath that fragile return, she felt an absence, not relief, but a space left behind by something that had withdrawn rather than departed. And somewhere beyond the white veil of the swamp, something unseen seemed to pause, as if deciding where to go next.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. What Remains. By midday, the burial was complete. The villagers worked in near silence, lowering Chantara's body into the softened earth at the edge of the palm grove where generations of Ban Nong Prai had been laid to rest. No chanting accompanied the burial, only the steady fall of soil and the hollow thud of wood settling into place. The fog had finally lifted, revealing a washed-out sky the color of bleached bone. Sunlight touched the swamp but failed to stir any reflection from its dark surface. Molly stood beside the grave until the others drifted away. The monk remained only long enough to press ash into the soil and murmur a final blessing before departing along the narrow path toward the temple road. "Let the earth hold what it is given," he said softly. Then he left. Afternoon settled heavily over the village. Doors opened, cooking resumed, children's voices returned in cautious bursts, as though testing whether sound was once again permitted. Yet something remained altered. Dogs refused to cross the path leading to the grave grove. Chickens skirted its edge, necks stretched low in wary arcs. Even the wind seemed to curve around that patch of ground rather than pass through it. That evening, Molly returned to her grandmother's house alone. Without the body, the interior felt larger, unfamiliar. The mat had been rolled and stored away. The ash circle swept clean. Only faint gray traces remained between the bamboo slats. She lit the oil lamp and sat where she had kept vigil for 3 nights. The air held no sweetness now. No resin. No trace of decay. Only the neutral scent of wood and dust. She exhaled slowly, allowing the silence to settle. For the first time in days, her chest felt unburdened. Outside, frogs resumed their chorus across the swamp. Insects stitched the darkness with thin, rhythmic calls. Life, patient and indifferent, reclaimed its patterns. Molly closed her eyes. Sleep came gently. She woke before dawn. The lamp had burned out. A pale gray light seeped through the slats of the wall. For several moments she remained still, listening to the quiet rhythm of her own breathing. Then she felt it. A faint pressure around her wrist. Not pain. Not restraint. Only contact. Her eyes opened slowly. A thin red thread encircled her wrist. The knot rested against her pulse. Tight. Intricate. Darkened as though damp. Her breath stopped halfway into her lungs. The room remained silent. The air did not thicken. No fragrance filled her nose. Nothing moved within the house. Yet beneath the fragile calm, a cold awareness spread through her chest, not of presence, but of proximity. Outside, the fog had returned in a low, thin layer hugging the ground. From the direction of the swamp came a hollow knock. Soft. Patient. Molly stared at the thread. The knot seemed slightly unfamiliar, as though tied by hands that had learned the pattern. But not perfectly. Her pulse thudded beneath it. In the gray light of early morning, Ban Nong Prai lay silent once more, balanced between breath and stillness. And somewhere beyond the reeds and dark water, something waited, no longer bound, no longer contained, only searching for the nearest place to remain. The villagers of Ban Nong Prai still follow the old ritual. The dead are kept. The thread is tied. The nights are watched in silence. No one speaks about what happens when the fog grows thick and the knocking returns from the swamp. Some say the binding protects the living. Others believe it only delays what cannot be contained. And on certain mornings, when the mist lies low over the reeds, villagers have been known to wake with a red thread around their wrist, tied in a knot they do not remember learning. Because in places where the boundary between breath and stillness is thin, the dead do not always leave. Sometimes, they only wait.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.